Getting from one place to another is an essential part of life for hundreds of millions of people across the world. But when we think about transportation, we tend to forget that it involves more than just getting around. Everything we own originated somewhere else, where it was built or created. Cars from Asia are transported across the seas. Things we buy online are transported through the sky. While these are impressive by themselves, they are still dwarfed by some other truly incredible feats. From moving the largest rocket ever built to towing the tallest oil platform into position, here are 5 transport operations that are on another level. If you're looking for an operation that is truly impressive, look no further than mining companies. In various places around the world, hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of earth are moved in order to gain access to the variety of resources, minerals, and gems that are located within. For these companies, it's a numbers game. Move massive amounts of earth to get access to a limited amount of payload. So, these operations require massive machines to move the dirt and rock. One of these is larger than most people realize. It's the Bagger 288 excavator. This massive contraption, built by the German company Krupp, is a bucket wheel excavator. When it was finished in 1978, it claimed the title as the heaviest land vehicle in the world, weighing in at 13,500 tons, or just under 30 million pounds. It kept this title until a slightly heavier model was built in 1995. Still, the Bagger 288 measures at 721 feet in length, 151 feet in width, and 315 feet in height. These excavators dwarf any others that are in use today. What is even crazier is that many operations have multiple Bagger 288s working on site at a time. This shows you just how big these jobs can be and what sort of value there is on the goods they're digging for. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. If you're wondering what happens to these machines after the job is done, it's simple. They travel to the next job site or to a location where they can be disassembled. Getting there is tricky, though. Being so large and heavy, they can only go so fast and over so much terrain. They move at a modest 33 feet per minute. For reference, on one trip to a job site, a Bagger 288 had to travel about 14 miles. It took 3 weeks to get there. If we ask you to think about the largest ship to sail on the oceans, what comes to mind? Is it a cargo ship? Maybe it's a naval aircraft carrier. Each of these are giants for sure, and definitely worthy of a person's admiration. However, they are not the largest ships sailing the seas right now. Actually, they're not even close. This is where we bring in the Prelude FLNG transport, the largest sea vessel on the Earth today. FLNG is an acronym that stands for Floating Liquefied Natural Gas, which means this vessel is a facility that not only transports natural gas resources, it produces, liquefies, and stores the gas at sea before carriers ship it directly to the market. As there are vast amounts of natural gas available, it takes a huge ship to get the job done. The Prelude is a 600,000-ton monster that is 5 times the size of the largest aircraft carrier in the American naval fleet. But what is commonly misunderstood is that this 535-yard-long ship isn't actually a ship at all. It lacks the ability to propel itself, needing to be pushed or towed between destinations. That means it's actually a barge. Moving the Prelude is no easy task. It requires the right weather conditions along with multiple large tugboats. When in place, the Prelude is anchored using dozens of massive chains and mooring piles that are drilled into the seabed. The theory behind building this barge was that remote and relatively small offshore gas fields may never be developed using the typical offshore platforms and pipelines. So, it makes sense to have something on hand that can do everything in one motion, thereby saving money over time and making some smaller, seemingly insignificant gas fields more accessible and profitable. Extracting natural resources like oil is an incredibly intensive process that requires drilling down thousands of feet into our planet. Now, when you apply that same principle to drilling in the ocean, the difficulty is increased many times over. So, engineers developed massive oil platforms to accomplish this. They are all monstrous in their own rights, but there's one platform that stands out above the rest. It's called the Aasta Hansteen and is one of the largest oil rigs found anywhere in the world. Owned and operated by a company in Norway, it is the country's largest spar platform. Unlike regular oil platforms, spar platforms are specialized for deep water operations. When you see these massive rigs, the first thing that is immediately noticeable is the platform on top, usually standing a few stories tall. This is where a lot of the work is done. But as workers can be out at sea for a couple of months at a time, the platform is also built to house them, coming fully equipped with cafeterias, offices, and places to sleep. Moving this structure was no easy task. The first part involved towing the hull from a fabrication yard in South Korea all the way to Norway and positioning it upright in the water. Once done, the topside was brought using 2 heavy transport vessels. This allowed for a topside to be placed right over the hull. Once together, you get an idea of just how massive and tall this platform is. Of course, this typically leads one to wonder how something so top-heavy can not only stay afloat without tipping over, but remain stable against the winds and waves. Hidden below the water's surface, the barge is moored to the ocean floor over 3,000 feet down. Additionally, the decks on top are attached to a massive cylinder that can be filled with water if needed in order to keep it stable. 90% of the rig's mass is actually below the water. If the entire thing were taken out and stood upright, it would measure to be taller than the Eiffel Tower. This is what makes it one of the most massive operations used today. Companies are serious about drilling for oil. One of the most oil-rich places in the world is actually in the Gulf of Mexico, right off the coasts of Louisiana and Texas. That area is dotted with quite a few oil rigs and are constantly in use. But that area is also prone to huge storms and hurricanes. Making sure they're secured is of paramount importance. In 1997, an oil rig was built that didn't need to be anchored or have huge ballast tanks attached. Rather, it would sit directly on the sea floor. It was named the Bullwinkle Platform and dwarfed anything that ever came before it. As with other platforms, 90% of the Bullwinkle Platform was hidden under the surface of the water. But this is exactly what made it one of the wonders of the industry. Concealed beneath the waves was a 77,000-ton steel platform that measured 1,736 feet or 529 meters tall, and it rested directly on the seabed. At the time it was built, it was the 3rd tallest freestanding structure on Earth, shorter only than the CN Tower and the Ostankino Tower. It was, however, the tallest in the United States, measuring taller than the pinnacle of the Sears Tower. The transportation of the platform was covered at great length by the news at the time. It was shipped using a barge and installed by Hirima Marine Contractors. Being towed through the channels of Port Aransas, Texas, where it was built, it dwarfed anything in the sea or on land. In 2010, Superior Energy Services took ownership of the platform and planned to decommission it at the end of its economic life. Speaking of massive structures, one organization that builds some of the most awe-inspiring in the world is NASA, and these structures are launched into space. Of course, we're talking about rockets and space shuttles. The largest rocket ever launched by NASA was the Saturn V. These rockets were used during the days of the Apollo missions. As you can imagine, Saturn V rockets weren't assembled on the launch pads. They were put together in large hangars and then moved to the launch pad. It's this transport vehicle that draws our attention, NASA's Crawler Transporter. Formerly known as the Missile Crawler Transporter Facility, the Crawler is actually composed of a pair of tracked vehicles and supports the upright rocket as it creeps along at a staggering speed of 1 mile per hour when it's fully loaded. But when it isn't a transporting vehicle, it can really show you its speed. A whole 2 miles per hour. Given the fact that it takes up nearly as much space as a baseball field, these speeds actually don't sound all that bad. We've already seen a few instances of how massive oil platforms can be, but this one, the Gulfax C, is by far the world's largest con-deep oil rig. It's called con-deep because it has a gravity-based structure that uses a huge concrete cylinder to keep it in place. Concrete deep stabilization. It is definitely needed because sitting above the water is a platform that is as large as a few city blocks. Under the water, 240,000 cubic meters of concrete and 80,000 tons of reinforced steel hold steady a structure that weighs 49,000 tons. Above the waves, the rig is a city unto itself, holding some structures that stand nearly 10 stories tall. Along with barracks, cafeterias, gyms, offices, and helipads, the Gulfax is able to store and refine the various resources that it drills up. To move the Gulfax into position, 11 tugboats with a combined total of 136,000 horsepower were used. Days later, the tugboats held the platform in position while skirts were anchored into the seabed below. This Norwegian rig is incredibly difficult to miss when staring at the horizon. It has been in operation since May of 1989, and it was intended to not have to be used past 2015. However, more and more resources have been discovered in this part of the North Sea. It is one of the worst areas for weather and remains incredibly cold nearly year-round. However, because of how much this rig is able to drill and all the additional oil fields that are constantly being found, it will likely remain in operation well into 2040. Whether it's moving actual material or moving natural resources like gas and oil, the machines and rigs used to move these things are very impressive. They stand as proof that humans are capable of some incredible technological feats. To see more videos just like this one, be sure to click the link on screen now. With that, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.